Well, I think for the sake of those who are already here, we'll just go ahead and get started. So my name is Raleigh Martin. I'm a program officer in the Division of Earth Sciences at NSF. And my co-convener here today is Leslie Shih with the Community for Data Integration at US Geological Survey. This is the fourth in a series of sessions, mostly that have been at ESIB meetings on federal data strategies. And the theme today is specifically about harnessing partnerships and innovation to maximize the impact of earth science data resources. As you're filing into the meeting today, we do have an opening Slido poll, which you can access via the QR code on the screen. I think the link is also in the notes Google Doc and in the chat for the Zoom call. So please feel free to respond to that Slido poll within the next few minutes. And then later, Leslie will reveal the results of that initial poll. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to be doing a few things today. First, Leslie is going to provide a recap of the prior three federal data strategies sessions that we've held over the past 2 years. Then we will have a roundtable set of presentations and panel discussion to learn about data investments, gaps, and collaboration examples across the federal agencies represented here today. And then we'll have an opportunity to explore future steps. Next slide. So I think the overall framing question for today's discussion is how do we continue to enable and support collaborations that span organizations, including agencies? So, our panel today is focused on federal agencies, but I think we would like to think expansively to include non-federal partners. And I think also we want to think expansively about collaboration around data strategies, not only in the ways that we are doing those strategies now, but also in thinking expansively about different approaches. So next slide, and I think Leslie, you will be presenting here.
Thanks, Raleigh. So hello, I'm Leslie Shih from the USGS, and Raleigh and I want to welcome you all here. I'm going to provide a very brief recap of some of the previous sessions in this series. Also, a huge thanks to previous people who have contributed to and presented at the previous series, including Megan Orlando, who has been a great supporter and a co-convener of some of the earlier sessions. So the first session was in July 2023, and then we held subsequent sessions November 2023, so not at an ESIP meeting, just sort of as a separate event, and then also January 2024. We really wanted to encourage sharing among representatives of different agencies. So the questions you see on the right of this slide, just who are you? What data does your agency provide? Who are your data customers? What are some challenges? Do you have a data strategy? Do you have links to share? And do you have a question for other agencies? So we really were concentrating on getting to know each other, making those connections. So you can see the agencies on the left: USGS, US Department of Agriculture, Environmental Protection Agency, NASA, NOAA and NOAA Fisheries, Department of Energy, NIH, the National Institutes for Environmental Health Sciences, and NSF. And thank you. Like, we had a first session and we had some feedback about other agencies that should be involved, and we've tried to invite them as they are available. There's a link here that's also in the Google Docs where we've compiled the materials from the previous sessions. All right, so in that first session, we started way back high up, looking at the US federal data strategy and resulting Office of Science, Technology, and Policy memos that were distributed to the agencies, different public access plans that were developed and updated, and specifically some agency data strategies to meet those memos and plans. In the middle, you can see the first group of presentations that we heard, and some of the focus that we had during that session was sharing what are the biggest barriers to implementing data strategies and trying to figure out what are some next steps we can take, especially in this awesome venue of ESIP, where it is a neutral space for us to discuss and collaborate. So in the next session, we just tried focusing a bit more on the challenges and also following up on Q&A from questions that came up in July. We had a couple of new agencies present and also source new topics from both the panelists and the audience. So the audience participation has been really useful to us to figure out where we can go next. So some topics that came up were data discovery, hosting files to support public access, paths to data.gov, and policy. What are policies we're coming up for data analyzed with generative AI, which I'm sure we've heard a lot more about since then. And then finally, a year ago at the January ESIP meeting, we had another agency presentation and then compiled links from participating agencies. We had a discussion of trust and ethics in relation to our data strategies, and again, sourced new topics. So trying to kickstart the discussion of ideas for partnership. We got some comments. Don't forget about OSTP coordination groups also are a place where cross-agency communication happens, and a bit of a discussion about some discussions are formal and public, but we can also sometimes maybe have smaller conversations to work through challenges we have. Okay, well, I did not yet go over time, and if it's okay, before we go around the table, maybe I'll share the Slido results in the poll. Okay, that means I need to press something here. Okay, whew, I pressed the right button. So hopefully you can see, if you didn't get a chance to click in the poll, it's still open. We're about 50-50 for people who have responded that have attended a previous federal data strategies session. Okay, I'm afraid to go to the next one to see what something that you remembered about the session. So yes, sometimes the last one was a year ago, which I remembered. The landscape is complicated, so the session was helpful for getting oriented. There can be more coordination between agencies. Attendees were enthusiastic about learning from each other. Honest answer here, don't remember anything. That's why we compiled all of the notes and everything from the past sessions. The great connections and commonalities across multiple agencies who are wrestling with the same or similar challenges, but perhaps in a different sequence, and great discussion. Okay, well, thank you for letting us know and letting the other audience members know a little bit more about who's in the room. I don't know how to go backwards. Yeah, we're still similar in the yes and no. So I will go back to the slides and pass it to Raleigh.
Okay, excellent. Thanks so much, Leslie. We're happy to welcome today four panelists, two of whom are Leslie and myself. And we also have Nancy Ritchie from NOAA NCEI and Katie Baines from NASA. Each panelist is going to present for up to 5 minutes. And we have asked our panelists in their presentations to try to address 5 kind of prompt questions. The first is about your respective agency, organization, and its core mission goals. Second is about key data investments supporting agency core mission. Third is gaps and unrealized innovation opportunities. Fourth is collaboration examples to address unmet goals. And then finally, ideas for the future. What we're going to do now is we're going to turn it over for presentations. I think Leslie is going to transform the Slido into an open forum for participants, anyone here today, to ask questions and upvote questions. And so then once the panelist presentations are done, we'll have kind of open moderated discussion for most of the remainder of our session today. So with that, I'll hand.
Before we go,
Yeah.
right now the Q&A isn't enabled yet in the Slido. I might ask Megan if she's able to do that on the fly. Otherwise, we'll just use the chat and the notes document.
Can do, and we'll report back.
Okay.
A chat message will be sent when the Slido is available.
All right. I'm going to go off camera so I can pop back up
Okay.
5 minutes.
Okay, excellent. So I think our first speaker is Nancy, so I'll hand it over to you whenever you're ready. And please, next slide. Okay, good, perfect.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and I'm glad that you've attended today. I thought it would be really helpful for you to understand where NOAA and NCEI sit. NCEI is NOAA's archive, but NOAA is within the Department of Commerce. Department of Commerce is all about economic growth. NOAA is about science, service, stewardship. It has ships, it has satellites. The satellite arm of NOAA is within NESDIS, and they provide secure and timely access to those environmental data and information. And then NCEI sits within NESDIS, and we're there to actually provide environmental data, products, services, and to help drive resilience, prosperity, equity for current and future generations. Next slide, please. So you've already heard the mission, but the vision is to be a trusted leader in environmental information for a rapidly changing world with a focus on those partnerships on the economy, not just the US, but around the world. Next slide. So key data investments, I've categorized these in 3 different ways. Firstly, there's leadership and guidance. We have leadership and guidance at the Department of Commerce with a CDO and ACDO who talked to us at the summer ESIP. There's a Commerce Data Governance Board. There's a Commerce Data Strategy. Each one of the bureaus within the Department of Commerce has a Chief Data Officer. NOAA is one of those bureaus. We also have a Chief Data Officer. We recently got an Assistant Chief Data Officer. And then each of the line offices within NOAA has an Assistant Chief Data Officer. And all of those help the Chief Data, those assistants help the Chief Data Officer with data strategies, data management policies, data handbooks, that sort of thing. And there's also a NOAA Data Governance Committee. We have similar data organizations meetings within NCEI as well. So the next category is infrastructure. So NESDIS is actively moving to the cloud, and I'll go into that next, and then I'll show you some of our data partners, some examples of those. So next slide, please. So NOAA NCEI is building the Open Information Stewardship Service, which is our archive in the cloud. We need that cloud environment because it's critical for us to operate, not just for data users getting data out, but also for data providers providing us all the data that they need. It utilizes technologies of the semantic web, linked open data. It enables open science, AI-based applications. The new approach will gather full provenance of our data and products, and it will facilitate transparency and scientific reproducibility. Next slide, please. So NCEI has partners in all of these sectors that you see here, and I'll go into some of those examples later so you can see what it really means to have an energy partner. Next slide. So this one is talking about the gaps. So NCEI aims to be right there in the center of service, science, and stewardship. And we partner, we ourselves create scientific products, but we also partner with other organizations to help them and to derive what kinds of products we need to be creating. We work across other organizations on the services to make sure our our services are what our users and stakeholders need. And that also goes along with stewardship. So we work nationally, internationally to become interoperable and work with our partners in those areas. So we keep trying to fill in those gaps as best we can. Next slide, please. So here's an example of some of our climate data, weather and climate partners. You can, just looking at these images, you can see that we work with the agriculture, we work with emergency preparedness, and the billion-dollar disasters. You probably heard about those, but you may not have thought about, we also partner with the legal system. We work with the HVAC and architecture, civil engineering, local planners, tourism, and actually retail. Next slide.
Nancy, just letting you know we're at 5 minutes, so if you could summarize the rest of your content.
Sure. So we also have partners on our oceans and coasts, and some of those are really relative to you. It includes public safety, GPS, and cell phone use. Next slide. This is what I'm thinking about for the future. We really want to become interoperable and work with our partners across all organizations, not just national, but international. And we hope to have linked and open knowledge networks that other people can use. That's it. Thank you.
Raleigh, would you like to give an introduction?
Sure, yes. Next up, we have Katie Baines from NASA. So I'll turn it over to you, and I'll put you on spotlight here.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for everyone. I see I have lots of familiar faces here in the chat, and thank you for joining me. So I am the Earth Data Officer, cool job title, but I rely on literally hundreds of people to achieve the work of the Earth Science Data Systems. And I'll give you a little bit of context, but I just wanted to be up in front about our role and our programmatic goals within the Earth Science Data Systems. I am at NASA headquarters, and the role as Earth Data Officer that I fulfill is overseeing the ESDS program, which oversees the entire Earth Science data lifecycle. We facilitate unrestricted access, backed by policy for researchers, managers, end users, and governments around the world to understand and protect our planet. Our program in particular has 4 main goals. The pithy version for a slide is to increase data systems quality and efficiency, enable and advance open science, evolving our capabilities in data systems, and fostering and building community in spaces like ESIP. So I'm really happy to be here. Let's go on to the next slide, and I'm going to spend a couple minutes on here because this is really a deep dive into the Earth Science Division, which is where I am particularly housed within NASA. But the Earth Science Division is part of the larger Science Mission Directorate, which really encompasses all of the science across the universe and into the cellular level that is being accomplished by NASA. So whether it be studying astrophysics, planetary studies, or heliophysics on our closest star, or studying our planet's individual ecosystems and systems, or biological and physical science, how we are reacting to life in space and how life reacts in space, those sorts of things. So that's all part of the Science Mission Directorate. But one of the really great things about the Science Mission Directorate itself is that it actually does have a Chief Science Data Officer. So NASA as an agency has an OCIO, it has a Chief Data Officer, it has a Chief AI Officer, like most federal agencies. And we work, but within science, we have the Chief Science Data Officer, whose role is to really oversee policy and practice across agencies' scientific endeavors. So a lot of the things that we have been doing are like at our level are being supported and have elevated to the Office of Chief Science Data Officer. So those of you old heads out in the audience may know Kevin Murphy. He was previously part of the Earth Science Data Systems and is now bringing a lot of that into NASA overall. And in fact, a point about the overall Science Mission Directorate is that we are looking to, in addition to an agency level data strategy, which we have one, we are also in the process of redeveloping and revisiting our science data strategy over the next 9 months. So keep an eye out for that. But now I'm going to focus back inward onto my program. Within the Earth Science Division, we have sort of 5 big program elements. The technology folks, these are the folks who are going to bring us the quantum computing and satellite networks of the future. They're investing heavily in digital twin infrastructure. This is the ESTO office, Earth Science Technology Office. And they bring a lot of low TRL activities up in level. Then we have the flight folks who really are focused on building and launching satellites and airborne campaigns and other suborbital activities. Then we have the research and analysis program that's really thematically science focus areas, focusing on different aspects of science and providing grants for that work. Then you have us in the data community. I'm going to separate us from the data and modeling, but this is one of our boilerplate slides for everybody. So I thought I'd give you a peek into that. Our data systems is not explicitly involved in modeling processing. But we are sort of lumped in together, looking at where the observations have been or where they are right now and projecting that out and running scenarios in the future. And then bringing all of that into a more public sphere with the Earth Science, with the Earth Action element of our program. So these sort of 5 fingers of the Earth Science Division's fist all work together to provide what we do at NASA Earth Science. But zooming in a little bit even further, so we started way out here in space in the Chief Science Data Office, zoomed into the Earth Science Division. If we go on to the next slide, we'll zoom a little bit further into my particular program.
And excuse me, Katie, just a time check. We are at 5, so if you could move along, we won't be so strict, but move along to the rest of your
Nancy did so well. All right, so we've been working internally in our program in all sorts of different directions, whether it looks at end user and user-driven feedback and support, whether we're looking at data standards, and I'm sure our conversation will go in all of these different directions as I step off the stage. But this is just sort of a visual of how we are investing all over our portfolio, specifically with end users, specifically looking at compute standards and visualization to really bring science alive. And we can move on to the next one. As we look at places where we can be innovating, as of a few weeks ago, we have over 13,000 data sets in one unified website. We have gone through a sort of a web modernization and unification activity led by Joel Scott, who's on the phone here from headquarters. We now have a total archive of over 140 petabytes. A lot of that has been in the cloud, and we have learned so much about archiving and distributing data into the cloud. I'm sure if you've been to any of these ESIB sessions, you've probably heard a lot about it as well. And we're growing at an unprecedented rate, and we're continuing to do so with launches in the future. And we're also looking to the future of AI and ML and how that can improve our modeling. These are more collaborations with external entities. So this is where we are focusing some of our innovation right now. Happy to talk more about it. Let's go to the next slide. And this is all couched in a larger strategy being put forth by the Earth Science Division that is really looking at foundational knowledge and all the way up to public understanding and exchange. So harkening back to that 5-finger fist of Earth Science, we are supporting within the data systems all the layers of this prism here, and thinking about how, and Joel is putting the plug for the website in there in the chat, so please do check it out. This is really driving a lot of our prioritization within the Earth Science Division right now, and a lot of the things that we are thinking about doing. More to come on this from everywhere. And then I just wanted to remind you as we go on to the final slide, breathe, that we are doing collaboration and partnership, internally within in our agency. With the Chief Science Data Office, we're also looking external to our other federal partners, our commercial partners, the Commercial Small Sat Data Acquisition Program, partnerships with cloud vendors and larger companies like Google or Amazon, nonprofit sector internationally, and within the United States, doing engagement with CEOS, GEO, and other entities at the international scale, and then really just getting ready to launch missions and build missions with many of our international government partners. So, all right, sorry about my overrun, but I'm done. Mic drop.
Thank you, Katie. Raleigh, sorry. Raleigh, would you like to do an introduction of the next speaker?
Yes, our next speaker is Leslie Shih from USGS, who I will be time checking. So please proceed.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Coming to you from the U.S. Geological Survey, I want to acknowledge contributors to the content of these slides. So besides myself, I'm the coordinator for the Community for Data Integration, Mike Frame, our Chief Data Officer, and Greg Gunther, the Chief of our Science Data Management Branch, also did contribute. And you may see in my slides, I have some elements that are a little bit common to the other slides you may see from other presenters. Thanks to the shared slide deck, I thought I would do a little bit of aligning when I saw some nice ways to present information. So just to get oriented, what kinds of data does the U.S. Geological Survey have? Well, we are the science arm of the Department of the Interior, so we work with earth, water, biological, and mapping data and expertise to bear in support of decision-making on environmental, resource, and public safety issues. So this great range of data types is one of the things I like to emphasize about what makes it so interesting yet challenging to work with USGS data, especially when you're trying to say something across the board. On the bottom, you can see a little bit about the I appreciated the other speakers giving us some context about where these organizations sit and how they're organized. So we are within the Department of the Interior, the USGS. There's 5 mission areas. I myself sit within core science systems, and then there's a science analytics and synthesis program and a science data management branch. The science data management branch manages a bunch of enterprise tools for working with data, but not to forget, there are other disciplinary data investments that are specific to, say, water or earthquakes. So on the next slide, I have just a selection of those USGS data investments, which we like to look at things through the science data life cycle. So we're trying to support all sections of the science data life cycle. And a lot of our investments are focused on USGS scientists and their partners. So we have digital repositories such as Sciencebase and other disciplinary repositories like the National Water Information System, just a few examples. Identifiers, the Asset Identifier Service, which was previously the USGS DOI tool. You may have heard Madison Langseth talk a bit about this at another ESIP session. A lot of investment in tools and resources for data and meeting those requirements and desires to make data more open and accessible. So information on a data management webpage, tools like the Metadata Wizard, packages for software like Sciencebase Pi and the Sciencebase Data Release Tool and Team, trainings and communities for data and software, data release, and the Community for Data Integration. So that communication, the investment in helping communication happen, much like ESIP does, so that different groups can learn from each other. And then also a lot of data investments in advanced scientific computing, high performance computing training, and hybrid computing solutions, which are always evolving. Okay, next I have a few selected opportunities. So there's a need to increase data discovery and determination of fitness for use, and some ideas for things we could do more in are encouraging cross-agency and cross-community disciplinary standards and analysis or use of what is the existing metadata and how to make it interoperate better. The next need is increasing the accessibility of tools, working code, and authoritative data that are currently restricted. So I think many agencies might have like some stuff can be public, but some stuff needs to be internal. But we'd really like to explore, design, improve, and encourage platforms that allow multi-organization access. We hear this all the time at the USGS. Another need, evolving towards more integratable and analysis-ready data across the USGS disciplines. So opportunities for collaborating to provide more data in support of, say, artificial intelligence adoption and training. And finally, another opportunity to have more participation and sharing information about participation in cloud vendor open data programs. We have a lot to learn to increase USGS data availability.
Okay, time check,
Oh,
you're at
I'm
5
at
minutes.
5 minutes now, so darn, that's hard. Okay, well, a couple collaboration examples, just noting that many collaborations are discipline-based. They're not across the entire USGS. Some of the topics can be seen there. So I'll just jump down to this bottom part where there's an opportunity to aggregate these collaboration examples at a USGS-wide level and share them to use them as models for further progress. And then for ideas for the future, I'll save this for the discussion, but really the reason why Raleigh and I just brought up this topic of leveraging and innovating and partnering together is to avoid multiple copies of things being rehosted and shared, and sharing information about different partnerships and vendors with each other, and more communication. So I will stop there. Thank you. And we can move to the final speaker, who I will introduce.
And I am the speaker. Oh, okay, go ahead, Leslie, introduce me.
The final speaker is Raleigh Martin, who will give us the perspective from the National Science Foundation. Go ahead, Raleigh.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. So the National Science Foundation in general, we're now in our 75th year, and our mission is to promote the progress of science, to advance the national health, prosperity, and welfare, and to secure the national defense. I am within the Directorate for Geosciences, which encompasses atmospheric, geospace, earth, ocean, and polar science. Our mission includes expanding educational opportunities for the geosciences, overseeing diverse state-of-the-art infrastructure and facilities, and building impactful partnerships within and across agencies, so very relevant to today's discussion. I wanted to note one thing that I think is different from some of the other agencies represented here is that the vast majority of our budget is allocated through financial assistance awards, so grants and cooperative agreements to external entities through competitive merit review process, so primarily universities and nonprofits. Next slide. Okay, so in terms of what this means for data, I can kind of conceptualize this as 4 layers of NSF investment. So the first is we do have our enterprise data systems that are kind of internal to NSF. This includes research.gov, which is our proposal management system, our public access repository, which is the place where grantees will upload publications and soon index data sets associated with NSF funding, and our internal enterprise data tools. But I would say the vast majority of our interest is in these kind of external layers of investment. So this includes NSF-wide investments in shared computing. We have our access program for various allocations to various computing resources, Cloud Bank for access to commercial cloud credits, and the National AI Research Resource Pilot. We also have geo-domain-specific data repository investments. So within our Geo Directorate, there are 4 divisions and offices focused around domain and regional science themes. And this is typically where our kind of core long-term investments exist. So you might be familiar, for example, in AGS, we support the National Center for Atmospheric Research, NCAR. And in the Earth Science Division, we support our seismological and geodetic facilities, which include significant data services. We also have, as our fourth layer of investment, cross-cutting data initiatives through our new RISE, Research Innovation Synergy and Education Division, within which we have a Geo Cyber Infrastructure Incubator, which has various special initiatives such as for open science and for AI-enabled science. Next slide. So thinking about needs and opportunities, I think the thing that distinguishes NSF as both an advantage and a challenge is that we're very nimble. We're able to, through our competitive funding programs, relatively quickly spin up new ideas. The harder part is actually sustaining those ideas within short-term grant cycles. But I think this opens an opportunity, if we can build the pipeline from the kind of innovations that are sparked at NSF to the more established long-term resources across agencies and sectors. I think that's a big opportunity. We're also always challenged with limited funds managing scope. So we support many data repositories, but they're often limited by funding to serve a specific user community. So we're always looking for opportunities to foster collaboration, find diverse funding sources so that these resources can broaden their impact. And finally, adapting to change. So as data volumes expand, new methodologies like AI emerge. How do we develop communities of practice that can diffuse these innovations so they can be adopted quickly? Next slide. So I wanted to just give a few examples where I do think there is successful cross-agency partnership happening. And I'm probably a bit biased by my own geoinformatics program, which I run in our Earth Science Division. So one of the facilities we support is called Open Topography, which provides access to high resolution topographic data products. And we recently established an interagency agreement with USGS so that some of those data products, many of which originate from USGS, can actually be served back to a broader user base. Secondly, we support the CESAR data resource for Earth sample registration, which recently received a NASA grant to build out their capabilities to support astromaterials. And then finally, NSF is leading a consortium of many agencies for the National AI Research Resource Pilot, NAIR, which is coordinating access to data computing, software, and training across federal agencies and private partners. Next slide.
You are just at 5 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So I'll quickly run through some ideas. I think this is repeating things others have said. Finding ways to further foster partnerships across our agencies and interoperability of the data systems we support is critical. Streamlining pathways for transitioning from research-oriented data innovation, much of which is supported at NSF, to the enterprise and mission data capabilities at other agencies and other sectors is a big opportunity. And then I think, perhaps as a low-hanging fruit, instead of trying to do everything at once, I think identifying low-hanging fruit use cases that can kind of accelerate these partnerships is a big opportunity. So I'll end it there.
Thank you, Raleigh. If we could have the other panelists come back on the screen on camera. We do have a discussion that is semi-facilitated coming up. Raleigh, I forgot if I'm taking your slide or who is speaking to this slide. Let me see. Raleigh talk. Okay, the note says Raleigh talks.
Okay, so I'm adding a spotlight here for everyone so we can see all of our speakers together. Yeah, so basically what we're transitioning to now is the opportunity for our audience members to put their Q&A into the Slido. And also we have some pre-seeded questions. I don't know if they're in the Slido now or if I should just read them out when the time comes. Either way, we can kind of work with that.
Okay, I will start. There is a question in the Slido, so we will get to questions for the specific speakers. As for the questions, I kind of mixed it up a little bit. Right now, there are 2 audience input questions that you can respond to what interagency partnerships do you benefit from or are aware of, and what federal agency data innovations do you wish were more broadly applied? That I think that is up there now. After we kind of do the Q&A for the specific panelists, and panelists can ask each other questions as well, maybe for about 5 or so minutes, then we're going to have another set of questions that the audience can vote on which one they would like discussed first. So that will be the next thing after this. So to recap, you can contribute to these questions in Slido in the audience, but also I will take a look at the Q&A and then panelists can ask each other questions. Good?
I think I understand.
Somehow it got this complicated. Well, the first question is for NSF.
Okay.
It says, do PIs have to budget for NSF compute in their proposals? Is there a base level of compute provided? How about other agency scientists for internal systems?
Yeah, so in terms of NSF computing resources, some of those computing resources, like the Cloud Bank program, that's something that you would budget for as part of your proposal. But a lot of those resources, like the Access program and NAIR, you simply need to be a member of the U.S. academic research community to apply for allocations. I think sometimes there are cases where having an active NSF grant is kind of an advantage in the process, but in many cases, you don't have to have an active grant to access those resources or to apply for allocations for those resources.
Can I ask a follow-up question about Cloud Bank?
Yes.
How many projects is Cloud Bank supporting? Because I've heard rumor of it, but I also heard that it was like really had a lot, like a victim of its own success. So like, how is it going? How's it scaling?
Yeah, well, first I can because I didn't really say what Cloud Bank is exactly. So it's a facility that NSF has supported that is based at a university. I forget which one. But what they've done is they've facilitated streamlined access to commercial cloud credits. So when a PI is preparing their proposal, they can kind of talk to Cloud Bank and say, hey, I want to do this, XYZ. Cloud Bank will work with them to kind of sketch out how many cloud credits they might need. They'll build that into their grant budget, but with no indirect costs tied to that. So just at the negotiated rate of cloud credits. If the grant is awarded, then they will have those cloud credits kind of allocated to them that they can use for their NSF funded project. And so I don't have specific statistics, but I know it's at least in the dozens of awards that have successfully obtained cloud credits through that.
Are there any other questions from the panel to other panelists? Because I think what we'll do is keep the Q&A open so we can accumulate those and people can vote on them, but also move to the 4 prepared questions so we can make sure to hit those questions that are related to our session topic and then make sure there's that time at the end to go back to the Slido Q&A. So right now is just seeing if we have panelist questions for other panelists.
I guess I'll raise a question. So Leslie, you talked about the challenge of bringing tools and technologies into the USGS ecosystem. I think this might have come up in the other talks as well, because there are certain restrictions on what can and cannot be accessed. So like, I think almost NSF has the complementary issue, which is that we have a lot of projects that are kind of eager to expand their impact, but it's often like, typically the tools that are developed in an academic setting are very open-ended in terms of who can use them, but they can often be, some enterprise users can feel like, well, we can't really use these tools because they're not authoritative or secure enough. So I'm just curious if and this is a question for you, but also the other panelists, if you've seen successful examples of those kind of research grade innovative tool development successfully transferring into that more controlled space of the other agencies.
Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted.
Okay, good. What an interesting question, Raleigh. And I'd say there is success in using tools maybe not at an enterprise level, so it's not supported enterprise-wide or operationally. So a tool is developed and then someone who's within that discipline can use it. One of the things we have that's sort of new is that any software that is in the cloud or downloaded, we have a process for inventorying that in USGS and getting approval. So I feel like in the future, this will be more of an interesting challenge that we can kind of monitor and see how many of the tools that USGS people are submitting to this inventory are kind of from research funding, and how did they get it through and what was needed, and learn from those examples. So definitely security and using things in the cloud that we know more about is a big thing, and thanks for bringing that up. It's something to take a look at in the future. Others?
So I'd say from the NASA perspective, at least within the data systems program, we actually self-fund a lot, or like have funded the creation of a lot of tools through our just through our community of DACs and SIPs and the ESDIS project and our impact project. So our different program elements have been developing software, and we have been releasing that through the NASA software release process, and developing contribution guidelines and things like that. But as far as taking on specific research code that is graduated, there are some instances of that, but it's often very intentional when we bring it up to an enterprise level. I mean, I think the most recent case of this was a low TRL project that made it, and I'm thinking specifically of open altimetry. But this was it may have started as an AIST project, which is that technology side that I explained in my sort of like the 5 elements of Earth science, and then would have been incubated sort of up into a higher level of readiness through our access program, and then was graduated into a DAC, in this case an SIDC. I think Giovanni, which is one of our internal tools, has also come up through a similar path. And these things aren't necessarily things that are coming completely outside of the community but there is a lot to talk about in terms of tools that are fully open and community-based, like the Pangeo toolset or GDAL, the mother of this sort of idea of open things that weren't necessarily initially funded, to my knowledge, by any specific institution. So that's a long answer to say we don't really have a lot of that going on, but when we do create something, we focus on how it can be reused.
And here at NCEI, it's very similar to what Katie was talking about. We do a lot of our own development in a sandbox. We have some people who come up with some ideas. In fact, today we had an ORR for one of the stacks, a new tool that we're going to be using for bringing data in. And so we work with those tools, make sure it meets all the requirements, security, et cetera, of NOAA, and then we can get that into our systems. As far as research grade software, we really don't get a lot of that externally. They tend to be, created inside. But we do look at it from a perspective of how can we utilize this in an enterprise way, if at all possible.
Raleigh,
Katie, I saw your hand raised.
Sorry.
Yeah, I have a quick go back. So I also mentioned earlier that we have the Office of the Chief Science Data Officer, and they have created a grant program. It is called Open Source Tools, Frameworks, and Libraries. And there might be another couple other awards in there, but are specifically targeted at these sort of foundational capabilities and across the science coded, like codosphere and providing longstanding support, but not necessarily with the intention of integrating them into a larger sort of like monolithic system, but more about creating the open source lifeblood sort of for these projects. So different way of looking at the problem.
Just to kind of tie the circle, I don't know what phrase I'm trying to use. It looks like there's an opportunity here, maybe just to share the requirements we know of bringing software into different agencies and making sure the others know about that if they do want to have shared use of a certain tool. I think that might be really helpful. Always evolving. Okay, what am I showing here? I think something that might be fun, the audience can now do some more voting about some of the topics that we might discuss further. They are also listed in the shared Google Doc under sample questions, but I think I just have to go over here and press play on this one, and then it will show up in Slido. So here's 4 questions, and the audience can weigh in on ones they might want to hear about first.
And Leslie, I saw there are also multiple questions that have come in through the Q&A in the last few minutes.
There are. Maybe you could choose one, or maybe the highest one, and while these votes are going,
Okay, that's a
go
good
to the
idea.
Q&A.
So the highest voted is, given this week's news, how do you plan to adapt strategies in the next 2 years to achieve your data management objectives while maintaining interagency cooperation? So, I think I'll start. I think each agency's mission remains the same and our capabilities remain the same. And so I think, this is kind of a generic answer, but I think we just work with the resources and the tools and the partnerships that we have and just continue. I think many investments that our agencies make and programs that we have are long-term. And so, I think we just continue on the path that we have in these various activities. I don't know if others want to address that question.
I agree with you, Raleigh. This week has been a flurry of activity coming out of the new administration. We really have to wait for the guidance coming from our agencies to figure out what the next step is. But we have our missions across all of our organizations, and they're very important, and we'll just continue to work towards them.
So next question.
Sorry, I'm just very
okay.
slow on pressing unmute. First of all, am I still sharing my screen?
Yes, you are.
Okay, and then second of all, I just wanted to say I echo what I just heard. We are reminded to just stay true to our mission and take things as they come, and working with data and foundational data is important, and the data can be interpreted by others, but we have a duty and mission to get that data out there. Okay. So now I go to the poll.
Well, I was going to read this next question.
Oh, go to the next question.
Yeah. So, because it has a lot of upvotes. ZAR is a fairly significant data innovation. Our agency is going to be coordinated in its adoption and support. So I'll start. I'm not too familiar with ZAR. My understanding is it relates to gridded data. And I know that Pangeo, which was a project that was initially funded by NSF, but has since diffused into other realms, is a software package that supports ZAR data processing. So I can't speak to the coordination element, but I can speak to the investment. I think that's definitely an area of interest.
Okay, I will just chime in that I've seen a lot of discussion in ESIP, which is wonderful, and I feel like a lot of participation and learning of USGS and sharing has happened through ESIP, and that would be a place to coordinate more. And that's what I've seen.
And I'll echo what Leslie has said. It would be great if we could coordinate across other agencies in its adoption and support, but I think we have to, we do a lot of that through ESIP, right? And so as that group moves forward, we can as well.
So yeah, I think the question about coordination is something we could do better. Absolutely, it's something that we within ESDIS, I was furiously Googling in the background because I know that we have staged some data in SAR format within NASA. And if someone knows more about this in the audience, which I am sure there are several people who do, they can speak up. But I do know that our Standards and Coordination Office has sort of done some preliminary research into the specification, and it's an approved data format for us, but I don't know the process intricately because I'm at the headquarters level, just sort of, I have to know these things, but not the details of how they were done. But this is something we've definitely been working on, and would benefit from increased coordination, I think, at the ESIP level with. I know also that the Europeans and the Copernicus program have been looking specifically at this as well, too. So even within the federal government and then even beyond, we could create more interoperable data by leveraging things like lessons learned from these.
So Leslie, did you want to go to the poll now, or do you want to take another one of these questions?
Why don't we go and take at least one or two of the poll questions, and
Okay.
then we can see from there.
Excellent. Do you want to read off the first one for us?
Yes, so it looks like currently the one with the most votes is what opportunities and challenges are presented by public access mandates coming into effect in 2025?
Does anyone want to start on that one?
Sure. I don't know if we actually have public access issues. We all have the ability to provide data to our users. However, users want more data all the time, and it might not be as easily available as they would like it to be available. I think where we have more of the challenges is with the additional information about that data to help them easily use it, make it machine readable, and actionable. The interoperableness of that data is more of a challenge. But that's where the opportunities are as we become more knowledgeable about how our users need to use the data and what their needs are, then we can create better data formats and package that information along with the data.
Well, I guess I'll chime in here. So, I think the public access mandate, which is basically that all data underlying publications resulting from NSF-funded research be made publicly accessible. We're expecting that to come into effect later this year. I think I think it's a great opportunity. It's going to drive a lot of great science and societal impact, but it's also a challenge because our budgets for supporting data repositories and data services are not necessarily increasing, and we're expecting a big increase in demand. So, the challenge of doing more with less, I think, is going to come into play here. And, this is where there's an opportunity for partnership. Are there ways we can, across agencies, build on each other's resources so that we're reducing redundancies and able to serve all of our users?
Yeah, from my perspective, I don't think that this is going to change anything about what we've been doing within NASA Earth Science, other than continuing to pursue guidance for folks. So we have the SPD 41A, which is a policy directive science policy directive that really pulls NASA in line with things like evidence-based policymaking, the American Innovation and Competitive Act, like the Geospatial Data Act, like all of these things that we've been following that are equitable access to federally funded research, things like that. These are guidance that we've been looking at for a long time. I don't know, perhaps I'm just woefully ignorant of mandates coming to effect in 2025 that are going to impact us. So maybe I'll go back to the books, hit the books on this one.
Thanks. So I got some input from one of our publications people. So as well as data, publications also need to be publicly accessible. And Kelly Haberstroh, mentioned that there was some good success in everything needs to be public. Something may be joint funded. Instead of making copies of things and making sure everything is all in one place, a lot of linking. So if there's a joint project, they make sure there's the ability in the system to link to other sources that are maybe hosted on other authoritative agency sites. So that was her suggestion of an opportunity. Make sure that there's the way to use identifiers and link to other things that are already out there, which has been done for publications, and we could see how to expand that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I think I see in the chat a mention of the PAR system. I think referring to the NSF Public Access Repository, tell me if I'm wrong. That's our system for our grantees to upload the publications as they're required to do, currently within a year of publication, but in the future upon publication. And that's actually a system that was developed by OSTI at DOE, and which was adopted, NSF, rather than creating its own system from whole cloth, basically adopted this existing system. So I think those opportunities certainly exist.
Raleigh, I'm trying to take notes, so maybe.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to go back on that question. The question was about public access, but the one thing that we have to rely on is that the people creating those products and writing those papers are actually submitting their data, because that doesn't always happen. So it's we can provide that access if we receive that data. So that there's a challenge there and an opportunity to entice those researchers to actually provide their data in a timely fashion to get them published.
And I think that was a very lively discussion at one of the ESIP sessions the other day on data management plans, is like, in many cases, the researcher doesn't feel incentivized to actually contribute well-curated data to the appropriate repository.
Right.
And you want to provide them with incentives, but sometimes it also just requires a mandate to make that happen.
Right. I think one of the challenges we'll have with the latest PAR requirements are the metrics. You have to link it back to the funder. You have to link it back. For us, we have multiple line offices, so data comes from all over. It's the metrics gathering. We're going to end up gathering more information from the data providers, things we never asked them before, creating all these identifiers for grants and such. And that's where we're going to have some challenges, is getting those metrics.
Okay, well, I think let's go to the number 2 question here. How can agencies harness innovation in data services, such as open source projects, while maintaining security and reliability? So I think it's kind of related to the question I asked before. Basically, on the one hand, like, you want to let new ideas emerge and new technologies emerge, but at the same time, there are certain services that you provide that have a higher level of security and reliability requirements. And so how do we straddle that chain of innovation? So I don't know if anyone wants to try to respond to that question.
Well, this even goes across our agencies. So NASA and NOAA, we are collaborating on the NOAA cloud or the Nestus cloud, where we're using some of the CMR, the metadata repository from NASA. And we've been doing that for a couple of years now. And we've got it installed and we're working on it, but it does take time. It does take a lot of coordination to do that, to innovate and use another agency's software and services.
So I think we are actually strategically investing in some new capabilities, but they're not like learning more about the czar format, spending time on kicking the tires on other formats and capabilities within the ecosystem, and doing studies before we roll them out. So I think that I think small targeted pilots are something that I'd like to continue to learn about. We have teams who participate in small scale hackathons where they're like seeing what they can do in 2 days on a large language model or something like that. These are not things that necessarily make it into, even NASA labs sort of things, but we are continuing to sort of kick around and maintain some space, some small amount of space for innovation, and learning about new standards and formats. But I think we also just have these sorts of discussions and create a space for that is important as well.
One thing, just kind of we talk about more collaboration, and I think ESIP is a great space for that. At the same time, I do think sometimes there are limits to direct agency to agency collaboration because there are a lot of bureaucratic hurdles that need to be overcome. And sometimes the quicker path is, instead of directly collaborating, creating pathways so that the research communities and science communities and operations communities that we serve have points of entry in across our agencies. So like, a grantee can come to NSF, or a PI can come to NSF, develop something through a grant here. And then they can also take what they've developed and directly approach NASA through NASA funding opportunities. So in other words, like, it's not NSF and NASA directly working together, but it's the PI, the researcher who's kind of opportunistically going to multiple agencies and bringing their great ideas to the table, to the different needs that each agency has.
I will chime in. I got, again, some input from other members on my team, and we're acknowledging that the security part of this question is a huge thing. With security threats increasing, sometimes as a user, I'm kind of shielded from that, but just realizing, like, yes, this is a real thing, that there are more security threats to our systems. So that just means that this is echoing what we've heard, more cross-agency collaboration and partnerships to have combined investment and learn from each other and use open source software. That is all helping. So some other things mentioned here are like technology transfer and other opportunities with private entities. Sorry, that's a lot of words, but I think that the main summary here is we do very much acknowledge the security issue, but let's work together to figure out some of those challenges.
Maybe there's been some chatter in the meeting chat, so maybe we can respond to that. There's been some clarification. So there were comments about PARR, which was not the PAR that I was thinking of, but it was Public Access to Research Results, precursor to the 2023 OSTP memo. What I think this is referring to was that there was a 2013 OSTP memo requiring public access to federally funded research. That was updated in 2022 with another OSTP memo, which is kind of the basis for a lot of the mandates that are coming online in 2025 for public access. And so then there was some kind of subsequent discussion in the chat about incentives, but also limits because of security and regulations, and also kind of resistance to public access due to metadata, onerous metadata requirements, data curation, and ability to comply with requirements. So I guess all of that's to say, if I had to summarize what is coming through in the chat, it's basically like there's widespread agreement that public access and increased accessibility of data is a good thing. However, often it can be more work, a lot more work to actually fulfill that promise. And I guess there's the danger that like you spend so much time making your data publicly accessible and well curated that like you can not have time to do anything else. So I don't know if that's an issue that has come up across folks here on the panel. Like, I guess, how do we balance pushing toward more accessibility of data, but at the same time not doing so in a way that's overly onerous?
Please let me know if you figure this one out.
So we've created some tools to help our data submitters easily submit their data with common sense questions that then we use that information to create the metadata. But with that said, the latest PAR memo, we're going to have to collect more metrics, which means we need more information, so that we're going to have to ask more questions. And that's going to put more responsibility on the submitter side to actually answer these questions. I don't know if it's helpful for those data creators and submitters to actually be incentivized, as that's part to do that data management and create that metadata by having that part of their performance. I don't know how to incentivize them, because I've worked with Eli and a lot of people across NOAA, and it is difficult for data scientists. I mean, they want to do the science. They don't want to do the documentation and the archival. So how do we help? And some of the ways that we've done that is to have people dedicated to particular programs to do that for them and to help them and create templates and do all that. So it's difficult at this point.
So from my perspective, this is certainly not any area of my expertise, but one of the things that we have been putting together, and when I say we in this sense, it's actually one of the benefits of having the Chief Science Data Officer, because they do focus specifically on things like open access to publications. They did put out a sort of help guide for how to engage and provide that. And one of the things, and I am not a member of this group at this point, but they do have sort of a publications guide in Markdown format for folks who like that. But one of the things that they talk about is participating in a organization called Chorus, which is really one of the I don't know if you all have participated or are aware of Chorus, but it seems like, and maybe I'm just ignorant of the actual metrics, but it seems like it does have relationships with open access journals. It collects metrics, it consolidates all of that. So is that a solution? I'm just trying to, I come to a meeting as a panelist and just try to solve problems that I am a little ignorant of, but is this something that could be useful? Or other folks using this?
So I haven't directly used Chorus, but Ted Haberman, I'm not sure if he's on the session today, has shared with me some analyses he's done using Chorus, which taps into kind of scholarly publication networks. And I think that Chorus provides some really excellent information to help analyze kind of for example, connections between publications and data repositories. So kind of understanding, how much of data that are associated with various publications are going into various data repositories. I think it is a really useful tool for for quantifying things. And again, I haven't directly used this, so if I'm butchering what Chorus is actually capable of, my apologies.
I know USGS has had some interaction with them in the past, and I can go ask around to see if there's something we can share about what we got out of that.
I guess one comment I would just like to make about the kind of challenges of data curation and the burden on researchers. One issue is that, it's great for all of us to get together in meetings like ESIP, but I think most researchers are not attending ESIP. Most of the people who are actually in their day-to-day science, generating data and needing to curate data for submission to repositories. So I think it's important for us to remember to meet folks where they are. And I think, some of the resources you all have described, both human resources, so embedding experts alongside scientists, and also just written resources, is extremely valuable.
And I wanted to make one comment. I was a little bit afraid to make it because for a long time, if someone brings up, oh, AI as the answer, then kind of there's a little bit of ha 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 AI. But I did see in the chat there was another mention about this is an opportunity to help with some of the metadata requirements. And I have heard in presentations there are several groups that are working on this as part of funded projects for different systems. And at our CDI workshop in a few months, there is a session on how, what is going on here? What are some projects that might be pilot projects of how that could help? So maybe in the future, this won't be like oh, that's what people say all the time, but there'll be things to look at soon. I feel like we're moving in that direction.
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out. I see that Douglas Rao is on here. He is the co-lead on the AI Ready data cluster in ESIP, which I think has, seen quite a bit of interest. And also there's a NSF funded project, FAIR. Don't ask me the acronym at 5:15 p.m., but it's basically about fair AI ready data. They had a workshop back in October, and identifying, it's kind of a chicken and egg, right? Like you want well curated data to train AI models, but AI can also help with data curation. So I think there's some really exciting activities that are going on in this space. And thanks, Douglas, for putting your link into the chat. I think, Leslie, maybe we have time for one more quick question before we wrap up. Do we want to pull it from the Slido?
All right, I think I'm sharing Slido, and we already answered that top one, so I'll try to make it go away.
We answered the first two. So
okay.
I'll just go ahead and read this one. How often do CDOs from federal agencies get together and share experience and strategies? Well, I don't know. I actually have no idea, so my apologies. Maybe Leslie, or Nancy.
I'll just start that yesterday I heard our CDO say, I was talking to the NOAA CDO about such and such issue. So sometimes this happens, but only the CDOs know, and we might not know that they're having conversations, but I think it is happening maybe more as a result of ESIP and conversations that happen at ESIP and people like us telling our CDOs like, hey, have you seen this going on? So that's my answer.
And at the federal level, the agency CDOs do have a group. I don't know if it's a council and then they have working groups off of that where they work on specific issues, questions, concerns. And they've been pretty assertive in their actions in the activities that they've done. And then that kind of trickles down into the line offices for us, the bureaus within DOC. All that information comes down through the Commerce Data Governance Board. And at times there are opportunities to interact with some of those federal activities.
So question actually for Nancy as a follow-on to that. I know that all the line offices have data officers. How often do those folks talk internally at NOAA?
We have a monthly commerce, or a monthly NOAA data governance board meeting. We have a leadership meeting also once a month. I'm on that one. The CDOs and ACDOs get together fairly often, and they themselves have assignments that they're working on. I don't know their cadence. I don't know if any of them were actually in here. That could answer that.
Oh, there, you got an answer. Okay. So
In the chat, in case people
There
aren't
you
watching
go.
the chat,
Yeah.
NOAA ACDOs meet biweekly.
So one of the things so a year ago, we didn't have data officers for all of the science disciplines within NASA. Now we do have someone with the job title, astrophysics data officer, heliophysics data officer. And we've been trying to get we're now starting to do biannual sort of like retreat style meetings. We have a monthly board discussion, but yeah, I was going to say it's a great question happening at the federal level, like what's happening. But I'm curious as to with my sister agencies how it's happening within the agency, because I almost never talk to our chief data officer, but I do talk to the science data officer, who I know talks to the data officer. So the flow down is internally a little bit weak, and I'd like to improve it.
It's actually made a difference having those assistant CDOs in the line offices and having that person to go to if you have questions, if they need requirements met with this new system we're building, all these things that are coming up. It helps the scientists actually have someone to go to when they have data and they need to submit it and get a DOI. Well, how do I do that? Well, now they have someone to go to. So it's made a difference.
Okay, well, I see we're now at 5:20, so I wanted to allow the last 9 minutes, I guess, for final closing reflections. So I guess the prompt here is, how do we continue to enable and support collaborations that span organizations, including agencies, even if we need to implement data strategies in different ways? So maybe we can go around the room, and if folks wanted to respond to that question or share any other reflections from today, please feel free to do so. So does anyone want to volunteer to go first? Okay, Leslie.
I'll go first. So I am just very grateful for sessions like this. I hope that people, whether they're on the panel or in the audience, just see other contacts that they now know. Maybe that's the person you can ask for a question that you have. I feel that through these sessions and other ESIP presentations, I finally now have a good idea of the structure of other agencies and some of those details that help when trying to figure out, like, what is the analogous group to this group I know about in USGS that is doing it someplace else, where we could maybe ask some questions or share some lessons. So really, my closing is, I know we're striving to get to a concrete thing that we can work on before the next ESIP meeting. And even if we don't get to that, in the next 7 minutes, I think we have a lot of ideas here and a lot of things that are like, oh, this seems like something we should be doing and sharing information about that came out of today's conversation. So just thanks for all of both the panelists and the input from the audience.
Does anyone else want to go next?
I'll just say that I think that a lot of the coolest things I've seen have happened sort of from the grassroots level and from people. So creating the space is like really, table stakes on how to get these innovations done, and having sort of the folks who are in the trenches, so to speak, or, working on these problems every day and saying, hey, have you, like, just creating a place to have those sorts of discussions and inviting each other when, we have technical interchange meetings and like have observers who come in and listen and maybe contribute and maybe take something back. I think it's a little bit trickier from a top-down collaboration perspective. I know how we've done it, so I'm just going to speak completely like how I've seen it happen in the past with our international partners is that, NASA makes an agreement with the European Space Agency that we're going to both kick in, $5 of our own money to have developers paid for, and they're going to kick in $5 of their own money to have their developers paid for, and they're going to create a communication plan, and they're going to work on something mutually beneficial. But it had to have sort of this framework, and it was done from the top down, but it was a very, like, it's a unique thing that I haven't seen in a lot of other places. And I don't know exactly why we couldn't do that at a federal level. And maybe I'm sticking my neck out there and trying to figure that out. I know that budgets are tight and things like that, but this is something that I always think about, how we can pool funds to do innovative thing. I know we pool funds to sort of create this space for innovation. But I'm just throwing ideas out there. So
I like those ideas. You're right. A bottom-up approach has worked really well, especially with ESIP. We've brought so many things that we were piloting, building to ESIP to have people test it out, to just throw it out on the table and get people's feedback on it. And it's really helpful to have that ability to do that. I hadn't thought about having some observers come in for some of the reviews of what we've come up with after we've picked it up back up off the table and gone back and created it. But I like that idea. But I think the more we can collaborate and coordinate, the more interoperable we'll end up becoming in the future.
I guess I should comment here. So I'm going to kind of repeat what I've heard from the other panelists. I think that the low-hanging fruit is definitely the bottom-up collaboration. I also think the low-hanging fruit is not necessarily trying to solve all problems at once, but looking opportunistically. Sometimes it's, all it takes is two people to collaborate. And so, maybe we're not bringing all of our systems together at once, but we are finding those connection points where I think, especially if it's kind of problem driven, I think if we can, if there are two agencies that have come together, it's like, okay, we're both facing the same problem that we need to meet our mission. And it's a very well-defined problem. So I think often the having that tangible thing that you're trying to address can lead to faster progress, which can then springboard into broader collaboration in the future. So I guess my message is like, let's look for those points of low-hanging fruit, problems about which, maybe very practical problems about which working together more can mutually benefit each other.
Well said, everyone.
Well, I guess we'll close out the session now. So I wanted to thank our panelists today, Katie, Nancy, Leslie, and myself. Also thank Leslie for really spearheading not only this session, but the whole series of sessions going back a couple of years. And thanks to our audience for asking lots of great questions, being attentive in the chat and in the Slido, and in participating in ESIP all week. Any last words, Leslie?
So have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone.
thank you.
Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.